All right, so we're still talking Unit 1 for 112, folks. Now, you'll see occasionally this coming into play here. I'm actually looking at the study guide from Unit 1 from, chapter 15, 16, 17 at this point, and try to hit on some high points the book talks about but doesn't get into too much. What I wanted to talk to is humanism and the idea of humanism and the humanism movement, which fits in with Renaissance, which, believe it or not, is linked. Again, it's linked back to the plague. It's linked back even to the Crusades. If we were in 111, what I'd be talking about when I talked about the Crusades is there is an attitude about Islam. For many folks that are more Western and Christian, the idea that it's barbaric, that these people are this and that and everything else. And the problem is it's flawed. When Islam goes ahead and they have the movement in the Middle East and they take over Egypt, they take over the Middle East, they reclaim what was Roman, what was Roman Egyptian, what was a variety of other things, what was Persian at one point, and so it's always been in play. They're going to go ahead and capture the libraries of places like Alexandria. And with that, they're going to capture the records. They're going to capture the learning. And no, it's not about looting and burning. It's about retaking what they feel was theirs and taken in the first place. But what they're going to do is there will be a group of scholars, there will be a group of learned people among these supposed barbarians who are going to look at the text, they're going to look at the learning, and there's what's called a translation movement. And the translation movement is simple. They're going to go ahead and translate this learning, this philosophy, this medicine, this history, this variety of learning from Greek and Roman into Arabic, into a variety of languages that they can better understand and comprehend, and then they're going to build upon this learning. And the building upon the learning is huge because what's going to happen is they'll continue the trend. Well, unfortunately for Europe, they're going to face the Dark Ages and they're going to lose a lot of this learning. It's going to get lost in history. And so when the Crusaders show up and they start to conquer and they start to find things, they're going to go ahead and uncover some of this learning. They're going to go ahead and say, oh, well, look, oh my gosh, this is Plato. Oh my gosh, this is Aristotle. Oh my gosh, this is Hippocrates. And so they're going to take this learning back with them. It's going to be retranslated and retaught. A really good example of this is when Saladin, the great Islamic general, faces off against Richard the Lionhearted, right? The legendary, figure from British England. That is a great king. Well, their forces are going to face off during the Crusades, and it turns out that Richard's forces are sick. Literally, they're sick. They've got dysentery. They've got disease. And Saladin is going to go, oh, yuck, I don't want to fight these filthy, disgusting, sick people. It won't be honorable to beat them. And so he's going to send his doctors, he's going to send his healers over to teach Richard's people how to treat the disease, how to treat the sickness, so that way they can get them up and fighting shape and have a good old-fashioned, righteous battle. This is the learning that Europe has lost. It's going to be reintroduced. This reintroduction isn't just about knowledge, just about reading it. It's going to be a variety of things. Among that is going to be philosophers. It's going to be philosophy. It's going to be a reintroduction of classical literature. And this reintroduction of classical literature is going to conflict with some of the religious principles of the day that have been pushed by the church. And so what happens is we get the birth of humanism. And the exploration of classical learning, the exploration of old Greek and Roman learning. Among that is going to be the exploration of myth and legend, which doesn't quite go with the church, but also you're going to see a reintroduction of art and art styles, a reintroduction or an interest in classical Greek learning and art. They're going to start digging and they're going to locate some ancient statuary. I mean, even Michelangelo is going to benefit from this movement. He is going to encounter a statue called the Laocoon Group. And the Laocoon Group, he's going to look at it because it's going to be unearthed at an old palace. And he's going to look at the Laocoon Group when he's called in, and he's going to go, oh my God, I suck. I mean, this is art. Look at the texture. Look at the straining tendons, the muscle. Look at the strength of these figures. And it's going to force him to examine what he does. And it's going to up even his game. And that's something. This is also what we see, pardon me, a reintroduction of myth and legend into art. The church is still in power, but we're going to see a blending of religion, and we're going to see a blending of myth, but we're also going to see an exploration of different types of art and expression, but also we're going to start to see a dabbling in science, a dabbling in philosophy and beliefs that is going to kind of bump heads with the church. We're going to see them doing this at different points with new science and new ideas. It's important because it's part of this movement, part of this exploration. The nice thing is the church has an awful lot of money. And because they have an awful lot of money, they can afford to commission artists. They can afford to commission statues. They can afford to commission new buildings. They can afford to commission feats of engineering and architecture. They can afford to pay Michelangelo to lay on his back for 3 years and paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. We get some fabulous art, but then we also get new forms of expression. Art makes a huge change at this particular point. We're going to see a transition from old art, old static, stoic, art into what is indeed the art of the Renaissance period. We're going to see the introduction of chiaroscuro. We're going to see the introduction of oil paints. We're going to see the introduction of perspective, both atmospheric as well as perspective of superimposition and things along that line. And so we see this huge birth of the movement and exploration. But part of that exploration is going to be searching. It's going to be looking at scientific principles, the exploration of certain ideas that the church had limited before. And so what's going to happen is we're going to look for new things. We're going to look for more trade. The trade we did have was lucrative in the Far East. What's going to happen is the expansion of the Mongols is now limiting trade with the Far East, that they now control the land routes. And what will happen is we're going to look for ocean routes to get to the same places the land routes used to get to. Because we're having to pay bribes, we're having to pay fees, we're having to pay soldiers to try to get across the old Silk Road, to try to get across what is largely now the Mongolian Empire, right? It's too expensive, and so they're going to look for a sea route. They're going to use the new technology, and this new technology, this new search is going to be commissioned by a gentleman named Prince Henry the Navigator. And Prince Henry the Navigator is from Portugal, and he's going to open a school of navigation. He's going to commission several different trips sailing from Portugal down the west coast, down the west coast of Portugal and down to the west coast of what is Africa. And they're going to explore, and they're going to chart, they're going to make maps, they're going to explore, they're going to set up trading stations along the way, and it's going to be a trip going back and forth. And each trip is going to go a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther, exploring the coast and setting up trade arrangements. Among the trade arrangements, unfortunately, we're going to start to see the introduction of the African slave trade. You got to know slavery exists before Europeans show up in Africa, but it's not the same kind of slavery. The slavery that's existent there is more about war. It's more about taking captives. It's more about debt and servitude versus what we consider, which is called chattel slavery. And chattel slavery is going to be the selling of people into permanent bondage. The form that exists in Africa prior to this is not permanent. You could either work your way out, or you could be freed via capture, or you could work your way free by paying off a debt. Chattel slavery is going to be completely different, and it's going to start off slowly, and it's going to be commissioned, unfortunately, by folks like Prince Henry. And the idea is Prince Henry wants to explore the coast and eventually find an alternative route to the Far East. And I'll talk more about that because that's what's going to launch the rest of the exploration.